Richard Dawkins evoca dois outros ainda mais conhecidos, Deus e Charles Darwin, embora não necessariamente nesta ordem de importância para o cientista e autor britânico que o milênio encontrou no Brasil. Quem não leu Deus, um Delírio, ou O Gene Egoísta, ou outros dos muitos livros do biólogo Richard Dawkins sobre religião ou evolução, poderia cometer a imprudência de achar que ele considera Darwin e Deus a mesma pessoa. Mas quem conhece a obra do ex-professor de Oxford, nascido no Quênia, sabe que ele considera essa mistura um pecado, ou melhor, um mal entendido, porque pecado não é palavra no vocabulário dele. Ciência e religião não se misturam no mundo de Dawkins. Ele endossa a primeira, rejeita a segunda. Uma postura audaciosa para trazer a um país tão religioso quanto o Brasil. Mas Dawkins não foge desses desafios e trouxe sua visão e experiência convidado pela organização da Flip, a Festa Literária de Paraty, no Rio de Janeiro. Foi lá, durante a apresentação do professor Dawkins, que gravamos este milênio especial, que será exibido em duas partes.
We will talk about evolution in a moment, but I would like to start off with your other book, which is about God. And this book has been translated in 31 different languages. It's been selling very well in many countries, including very religious countries like Brazil. So the question comes to mind, do you think there are a lot of closet atheists out there hiding and embarrassed to expose themselves as non-believers?
I certainly hope so, and I do think so. I have traveled a lot in the United States promoting the God delusion, and I particularly have traveled in parts of the United States that are described as the Bible Belt. And so I was expecting to get a somewhat mixed reception, but in the event, everywhere I went, I got huge audiences, enormously enthusiastic, thousands of people, all apparently agreeing with me that there is no God and we'd be better off not believing in one. And I think that exactly as you say, there are lots and lots of closet atheists who, at least in the United States, have never really dared to stand up and say that's what they are. So when I go to a place like Oklahoma, which is said to be a very religious state, 3,000 people showed up in one hall, and they stood up at the end, and I think they looked at each other and they realized I'm not alone. There are others like me, even in Oklahoma.
Or even in Brazil, you could say. Where do you find the strongest resistance to your ideas, if not geographically, like Oklahoma and the Bible Belt, intellectually? Where do you find the challenge?
Well, I shouldn't leave you with the impression that I got no resistance in Oklahoma, by the way. There was a congressman in Oklahoma who tried to get my talk banned and tried to censure the University of Oklahoma for inviting me. So there was opposition from politically powerful forces. Serious opposition. I don't think there is a hell of a lot of serious opposition. I think the most serious criticisms I get are from people who say, I'm an atheist, but, and I'm getting very, very used to that phrase, I'm an atheist, but, and they accuse me of being impolite, discourteous, not sufficiently sympathetic towards religious people. I think that's a misperception, by the way. I think that there is a general feeling, we've all been brought up to believe that you mustn't criticize religion. You cannot criticize religion. And therefore, even a fairly mild criticism of religion sounds aggressive, sounds strident, sounds shrill. Actually, I would like to think that The God Delusion is quite a funny book. I don't know whether the humor shows through in translation, but I hope so.
The book makes clear that you would prefer to see a world without religion. But then the argument comes from many people who say, well, how about the relief that religion provides to many people, like people who have lost their loved one and think, well, at least I can meet them and on the other side.
Yes. I do think that's a serious point. People do undoubtedly get consolation from religion. The first thing to say about that is that because something is comforting and consoling, that doesn't, of course, make it true. It's obviously a logical fallacy to suggest that because something makes you feel good, that makes it true. There are those who would rather not hear the truth, and a good test would be, would you wish your doctor to tell you when you have a fatal disease? Some people would prefer not to know when they have a fatal disease. Some people would prefer their doctor to tell them. And doctors often make a judgment whether they're dealing with the kind of patient who needs to know the truth or the kind of patient who would prefer not to know the truth. So I think it's rather an analogous case. I don't think you could ever say that it would be a justification for not writing a book, the fear that somebody might be upset about it. If you're going to be upset about reading my book, don't read it.
How about the side argument that people say that is another plus of religion, is the fact that it has inspired magnificent works of art through the ages, you know, from the Sistine Chapel to the music of Bach, and I know you're a fan of Bach, and so do you think the inspiration is an important factor?
Yes, I mean, there's no doubt at all that religion has inspired great art, great music, great poetry, great literature. The Bible itself is great literature, certainly in the 17th century English, which I'm most familiar with, and my guess is that the Bible in Portuguese is probably great literature as well. I do feel very strongly that all children should learn about the Bible, should read the Bible, because you cannot appreciate literature, you can't appreciate European literature, you can't appreciate European history without knowing the Bible. And so that I feel very strongly. If we get rid of religion, then biblical history, biblical literature will go on being important in just the same way as the Greek gods are important for understanding literature. You can't appreciate much of literature unless you know about Zeus and Apollo. You can't appreciate Wagner unless you know about the Norse gods. Nobody believes in them anymore, but they're a part of our cultural heritage. Things like the Sistine Chapel, things like the music of Bach, well, that is, of course, very beautiful, very important. If you ask, does that in any way support the contention that there's some validity in religion? Of course it doesn't. Great artists go where the money is. And it's always been the case that rich people are able to commission the art that they want. And in the time of Michelangelo, in the time of Bach, the people who had the money were the churches. And so that's why great art was done for the churches. It doesn't, of course, make it true. I would even go so far as to say that the story, for example, of the St. Matthew Passion is a very, very moving story. It's not just the music of Bach that makes it moving. It is a moving story in itself, and one can, of course, appreciate the drama and the emotions of great fiction. You can still appreciate the Bible story even though they are fiction.
So as part of your interpretation of the Bible as fiction, the concept of the world being created in a few days, at a certain time about 6,000 years ago, all at once, that goes into an enormous contradiction with the evidence of science. So you think that is the part that should be rejected? Well,
the world is filled with beautiful origin myths, and anthropologists will give you hundreds, probably thousands of origin myths which have great poetic beauty and which are well worth studying as literature, as cultural artifacts. The particular origin myth that we're most familiar with, which is the Jewish one, which I think has its origins in Babylon, is no more beautiful, no less beautiful than any other.